Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to interCHANGE. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about this woman who stole all this money from the Koss Corporation, money she used to support her bizarre shopping sprees. We'll talk about the schizophrenic Milwaukee County voters. They are crazy about Scott Walker when he runs for county executive, but then they also elect a bunch of supervisors who don't support Walker at all when he puts together a budget. And we'll talk about the Wisconsin gun deer hunt, which starts this weekend. Okay, joining us tonight, our newspaper columnist, Joel McNally. Longtime state Senate Republican aide and oftentimes a host over at WISN Radio, Kevin Fischer. Denise Callaway is the communications director for the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. And Gerard Randall, consultant and local job creation specialist. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, let's talk about the Sue Sachdeva thing first. She's the woman who was in charge of the books over at the Koss Corporation, sentenced this week to 11 years in a federal prison for stealing more than $30 million from the company. She used much of that money for these weird shopping sprees where she'd buy all these clothes that she would just stick in storage. All colors, all sizes, obviously a woman with some severe mental health problems. But is anything accomplished at all for her or for society, Denise, by putting her in a federal prison? What does that accomplish, really?
Well, she clearly is mentally ill, and I hope that there are some provisions made for her to receive treatment for her illness while she's in prison. But the reality of it is she stole millions and millions and millions of dollars from that company. She put the company in financial risk, severe financial risk, caused irreparable harm, and I think when you do that, you have to go to prison. The key thing is she needs to be able to receive some treatment while she's there. I still am curious to find out what's going to happen to those people who obviously knew that there was something that was going on that was wrong. First of all, there were some questions about who knew what about where this money was coming from transfers that her staff made to different accounts that clearly were not associated with the company. And secondly, I think we have to look at some of these business owners. When she would come in there and repeatedly drop $100,000, $200,000 for things that she never tried on, where the time she would come back and she would actually try to buy items of clothing that she already owned. Clearly, I think there's some culpability that they have as well.
Kevin, I've always been a lock 'em up and throw away the key type person.
Good for you.
In this case, though, I'm wondering, is society well served by locking up this obviously mentally ill woman for such a long period of time?
Yes, because as Denise said, there are consequences for crimes. Now, this is a white-collar crime, so it can be viewed differently because instead of seeing an evil-looking, maniacal, diabolical, disheveled male criminal in handcuffs and in an orange jumpsuit, we see a middle-aged woman in a business suit. And there wasn't anybody who was killed.
A lovely Chanel business suit, by the way, but
and
still.
a very nice business suit, and very nice dress shoes, and nice jewelry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No one was killed, no one was assaulted, no one was raped. So there wasn't physical harm, but there was fiscal harm. And so we look at this and we say, well, my, she got that for doing that. It doesn't seem right. White collar crime is serious and should be, and the punishment should be meted out to send a message that you just can't do this. And I believe the court system did not view a potential mental illness as a legitimate defense. And I think she would have got more. She was before Judge Lynn Edelman, who has the reputation of being very liberal. She could have gotten much more, and he does. Don't laugh, it's true. So I think society is served if you commit a crime of this magnitude, even though it is a white-collar crime. You must suffer the consequences.
Does it send a message to somebody like a Sue Sachdeva who's out there who might have the same mental illness? I don't think it sends any message to them at all because they aren't going to get it.
You know, I always used to tell people I couldn't have writer's block because I never made enough money. We don't talk about, poor people who commit crimes, even violent crimes, who might have mental illness because of the horrible conditions that they've had to live in. But for some reason, when very wealthy people commit crimes, there must be a mental illness. She wasn't charged for these bizarre shopping sprees.
Which isn't a crime to go out and buy a lot of clothes. It's not a crime.
She was charged for stealing. She was charged for stealing enormous amounts of money. And it absolutely is true that many white-collar criminals steal millions and millions of dollars and everyone's worried about, you know, my God, they might have to go to prison for this. While, you know, some, you know, black teenager who knocks over a filling station for, you know, $20 can go away for the rest of his life. And of course she had to get a substantial sentence, and this is a substantial sentence. I'm not saying she doesn't have problems. She clearly has problems. But some of these problems may be a sense of entitlement, a sense that because of her lifestyle she can do anything and deserves anything and deserves everything she sees, yeah, that's bizarre behavior, you could say, and you could call that mental illness, and I certainly, you know, sympathize with mentally ill people and have known many, and they need treatment and they need any kind of help they can get. But no, we don't let, you know, white-collar criminals and people, just because they've stolen enormous amounts of money, not be punished for stealing. And this was stealing. And she was charged with stealing.
Might I add, legally, she was not mentally ill. Legally. Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't legally mentally ill. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that what she was doing was wrong. So mental illness. She made
efforts to cover up the amount of what she was buying?
Absolutely. She orchestrated all of this knowing full well that it was wrong. And again, for that, she needed to pay.
Is it a fair sentence?
I would have given her more time. I looked at this just as has been pointed out. There was collusion involved here. This wasn't a case of someone who was dim-witted and didn't understand either how to cover up their tracks or how to convert the profits of the corporation into their personal gain. This was someone who knew all of that and at the same time maintained a position of trust, not just within the company, but within civic society. And I think that's what she's going to have to pay back to the community. And I don't know if she'll be able to pay back the trust. She's already admitted she's lost her family. She's lost her place in our society. She's lost her job. What more could she lose? It's very difficult to get your integrity back and regain the trust of the people that had trust in you, and particularly a fiduciary trust.
Don't you find it absolutely mind-boggling that a company, not that large of a company either, can be missing $34 million,
yes.
and neither the
Yes.
silk stocking
Right.
accounting firm that's looking at the books tells you, and you don't know it yourself?
Well, that's an issue. All of the directors that had a responsibility to examine more deeply, scrutinize more closely the operations and the financial records of the corporation, someone had to have asked questions somewhere along the line and gotten more than the thin answers that they got. If you're going to have that much money missing out of a small business, and then all of a sudden this thing happens and the light bulb suddenly comes on. I think Denise had pointed out, what about the shop owners? You're coming in and you're buying not just hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff, you're buying millions of dollars of stuff. And then you're not leaving with it.
Pick up the phone, call the police?
Well, the American Express certainly should have picked up the phone a lot sooner than they did, because they were getting paid off for clothing. I mean, they've got people, if I take my charge card and I go outside the state and buy $30 worth of something, they're calling to find out.
You buy $3,000. Well, so we'll give this $30 business.
$30. You've got my decimal points misplaced.
All right,
But
next.
they could have figured something out a lot sooner than
Obviously,
they did.
they're not savvy about white-collar crime. They're not as knowledgeable as they should be, these companies.
All right, next topic. The Milwaukee County Board this week overrode nearly all of Scott Walker's vetoes and restored the entire $7.5 million that Walker had tried to cut out of the budget. So once again, county taxes will go up. If county voters loved Walker's tax cut message so much that they voted for him over and over, why do they then turn around and support a bunch of county supervisors who don't give him the support he needs to keep taxes under control, Kevin? I don't understand that at all.
Beats me. I'm bewildered, but I think there's a philosophical split. You have to remember that Milwaukee County politically is still very Democratic. So there's that faction on the county
Those damn
board.
liberals again.
Well, in a sense, yes, Joel. There's this faction on the county board that believes the solution to our problems is more taxation, more government spending, more government programs, more government control, more government intervention. Then you have the suburban voters who are clearly in the camp of Scott Walker and who are represented on the board by conservative members who have the different philosophical approach of less government, less taxation, less spending. And those kind of play out, and you have a greater faction on the board that is anti-Scott Walker than there is pro-Scott Walker, and this is what's playing out here. Scott Walker says, "Hey, I'm going to submit a budget that does not raise property taxes." It goes to the board, and the board has enough votes to override. Even though I think there's plenty of voters in Milwaukee County that support a zero to minimal property tax increase philosophy, but that's not happening because the numbers aren't there. You have more people on the county board that do not subscribe to the Scott Walker philosophy of smaller government.
But you know what? Scott Walker didn't subscribe to that philosophy.
Sure
Scott
did.
Walker every year submitted the exact same dollar amount budget that the county board passed the year before. That means he agrees with what the county board did.
Well, it's a 0% budget.
Taxes went up every year. He let the county board raise them every year. They both played their little, phony roles in this. Scott Walker submitted a budget which did not include enough money to run the county. Every year, the county board would put in enough money to run the county. They both played their roles. Scott Walker got to get elected governor, say, I never submitted a budget that raised taxes, except that taxes went up every year.
Not because of him.
Yes, because of him. Every year he raised taxes by submitting the tax increase that they passed the year before. He agreed with their tax increase.
That's a bizarre assessment.
It's true too. It was a total charade.
He has never submitted a budget that increased taxes.
He did too.
Yeah,
every year.
I'm not so sure that I would totally agree with what Kevin had to say in terms of the
there's
fact that there's suburban folks, supervisors in the county board who are more fiscally conservative. Because you have to remember, 11 of those 15 vetoes were overridden. So obviously, there was a majority of the board that felt that these are dollars that are necessary to run the county.
Some of those dollars brought in other dollars too.
And I think all of us would like to see no type of tax increase at all. I mean, that's great. On this panel, I would certainly vote that I would want to see a tax increase. But here's where the rubber kind of hits the road. And here's where I think those county supervisors are in a tough spot. They have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the county is able to do the job that it's charged to do in terms of what the state requires a county to do, the services that it needs to be able to perform. If you're going to do those things, you need to make sure you have enough money in the budget to do it. If you don't, you're not upholding your fiduciary responsibility as an elected official to provide the services that are mandated for the county to do.
And I would agree that those responsibilities include, of course, state-mandated courts and your social services, which make up about half of the budget. Right. But there's plenty in that county budget, plenty that could be privatized or dumped. Does the county have to be in the business of running tennis courts and golf courses and a zoo and an airport?
Scott Walker has said that the state should pay 100% of those things that mandates the county to do.
And he's
right.
right.
Now that he's governor, I want to see him submit 100% paid
I think
for everything that it mandates.
One of the worst things the state has
do.
done has been imposing these unfunded mandates on local units.
Then let him pay for it. Let him pay for them from the governor's office.
That needs to stop.
And unfunded policies that lead to spending that go back to municipal governments, especially at a time when we know there are going to be drops in shared revenue that will come back to municipalities. That's almost a given.
Which will probably lead to big local property tax increases.
Scott Walker's going to lead to local property tax increases? Is that what you're saying?
Regardless of who was elected in this past election.
Really, that's
I
kinda
think
shocking
we were going to
from you
see
Republicans.
we were going to see increases in the cost of people's share of paying for government.
And Scott Walker's going to do that.
Well, Scott
Increase
Walker's
local
going to do it.
property
Tom
tax.
Barrett was going to do it. No
Jim
matter
Doyle
who
has done it.
And he has done it in
been doing it
an
for the last 8
underhanded
years.
sort of way.
Kevin has attacked Jim Doyle for it, but I want to see you attack Scott Walker for it if he does it.
Well, I don't know that Scott Walker has fully laid out his plan as to how he's going to go about balancing the state's budget. I can tell you this, there will be significant cuts, more cuts in government than what we saw under the last two administrations.
But he's going to raise local property taxes.
Oh, he doesn't have that
Well,
power. But in fact, I think he'll even shoot for a statewide property tax freeze.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. I think you're going to see more furlough days.
So he'll cut the aid and he'll say you can't raise taxes to make up for it.
Which can be done to balance the budget.
He might.
I mean, you can't keep spending your way.
That'll be great.
You can't keep spending your way out of a $3 billion
and then he
deficit.
says you can't raise taxes.
Well, you can't keep spending your way out of a huge deficit.
I think
the problem that we have, whether we're talking about the county or the state, is that there are points in time when tough decisions should have been made about what we can and can't afford to do and what our priorities are.
You're absolutely
right. And
right.
because we haven't done that, whether it's been a Democrat or a Republican who's been sitting in the governor's office, whether the legislature has been controlled by one party or the other, nobody's been willing to make those kind of tough decisions. That's why we have these conversations.
We've made those decisions. We decided higher education is worth paying for. We decided that public school education is worth paying for. Now, if Scott Walker has a different decision to make, okay.
Well, he's not going to use your kind of math.
We said it's worth paying for, but at what level can we afford to continue
about the level
those
that we
commitments?
need to pay?
Guys,
we started out at 33%. We said we would fund K through 12 at 1/3 of the cost and take it off the property tax rolls. What's backed up into all of this is the cost of running those programs, and at the same time, the state's commitment because of reduced revenue and exploding cost in some of the other arenas like corrections. That money simply is not there unless we put a greater burden on the people who pay for it. We've seen tuition increases go up, and we've seen property taxes go up, and people are saying enough.
Or what we need to do is decide what our priorities are and to make some tough decisions. The corrections budget keeps going up in part because we've decided that we have a certain type of tolerance when it comes to incarcerating people who have not committed violent crimes. Most of those drug-related offenses, most of those who end up in prison are African American. So what I'm saying is, as a state and as a county, we need to make some decisions about what our priorities are, because if we don't, next year, we're going to be sitting here again talking about
priorities are cut. I don't want to hear any whining that we threw grandma out into the snowbank.
What we're going to do is we're not going to get out of this yearly discussion of property tax rates until we make some good decisions about what our priorities are.
In some state programs, if you go through line by line by line, they've been around for 20, 30 years, and we keep just providing and approving them, and they're wasteful and they're ineffective. Those need to go. Well, Jim Doyle's been doing a good job of it too, wasting money the last 8 years.
All right, next topic. Nearly 600,000 hunters will take to the Wisconsin woods during the next 9 days for the annual deer hunt. They will shoot or harvest hundreds of thousands of deer. Two things. Do you think most city folks realize how incredibly important hunting is to the economy of this state? And second, isn't it interesting that you can have hundreds of thousands of people walking around with fully loaded guns and there won't be any incidents of crime at all?
Kind of shoots holes in that whole argument of gun control. You got 500,000 people.
So we should have 600,000 people with rifles in our streets?
Yeah, we should.
The line of logic.
People carrying guns in the city of Milwaukee, you'd have less crime. But yeah, deer hunting is important.
We can all wear blaze orange to kind of identify ourselves.
Well, deer hunting is valuable for lots of reasons. Just for the economy, millions and millions of dollars that those hunters will spend on driving up north when they get there, spending money on guns and ammo and lodging and transportation and meals. That's
and
one thing. They will help.
I've never believed they drank that much beer.
They will thin the. They will help thin the herd. They will help farmers keep their vegetation so that vegans can be happy. There are all kinds of values. The family bonding, this is a tradition that dates back years and years and years and years. So there's so many positives, and I think there should be more people hunting. There should be more people.
But you know what? There are
this.
fewer all the time, and the truth of the matter is, it is a dying sport. There are fewer hunters out every year. There are fewer deer taken every year. That's why they had to lower the age to 10 or 3 or whatever they've lowered it to now to try to get kids interested. The truth of the matter is, you know, it was very weird when the chronic wasting disease came about and people started worrying they wouldn't be all those deer that we have to harvest. You know, we got to keep them alive so we can shoot them. It is very bizarre.
Well, that's DNR.
It is a thing. It is a thing of the. When you say, you know, they're helping out the farmers all over the state are posting their property, say stay away from this.
They're
farm.
Also helping the
they
poor.
They don't want these people.
They're
out
also
there.
helping the poor with the millions of pounds of high protein, nutritious venison that is being served in our soup kitchens and our homeless shelters.
You know, Denise,
Let's remember
I
that.
actually am a pretty strong gun control person, but somebody said that to me a few years ago, and it's always stuck in my brain. You'll have hundreds of thousands of people carrying guns, walking through the woods,
many
and
will
there
die?
won't be one crime.
Yeah.
There won't be
Actually,
one.
there was a big crime just
a couple
few
years
years
ago.
back.
Yeah.
I meant
Yeah.
to- okay.
But it was also a racial incident between, you know, white hunters and a Hmong that they didn't
But
like
they're-
around their property.
But it's very
I
unusual.
think, I think that's like mixing apples and oranges, though. I mean, I really do.
But maybe it's the people who carry the guns and not the guns that are causing the problems.
Well, perhaps. But I also think, you know, when we take a look at deer hunting, it is a tradition. It's a part of our history here in Wisconsin. And it's something that I don't think most people do value in the city. If you haven't been deer hunting or you haven't been around people who've been deer hunting and in that environment in some of these small northern Wisconsin towns, where, you know, where there's a lot of money that's brought into the economy, I don't think you really understand the tradition that it is. So I think it's something that people don't really understand and don't appreciate it.
That doesn't make it
Fewer all the time.
Yeah, you know, and I think of my brother-in-law, boy, I mean, you know, we'll be lucky if we see him for too much time on Thanksgiving Day. But we also say with him, and you know, maybe this kind of goes back to why there's no crime, that when he's in the woods, it's the safest place for a deer to be because, you know, not everybody who goes deer hunting, you know, brings home a deer.
Hunting was a tradition in my family. My dad and my uncles would go to some of the more rural parts of Illinois, and they go small game hunting on Thanksgiving Day. My job was to dress that game. So that's an aspect of hunting that I don't miss. But
What did you put it in, Gerard?
rabbits, raccoons, squirrels, I tell you, there was
A nice little tie or a
more than my
vest.
fair share of those little critters that had to be skinned on Thanksgiving Day, and then to sit back and eat turkey. But it was a tradition that we all appreciated, even outside of Wisconsin, and it's a tradition where I think you find many members of our family who come up through that southern trail up along the Mississippi and settled in the north. It's a tradition that's still very strong with them.
And city folk, Denise, should be happy that there are deer hunters because it's because of these deer hunters that those deer aren't crashing through your living room window.
Or your car.
Yeah.
All right, time to move from the woods of Wisconsin to the wilds of Washington, D.C. With the midterm elections behind them, all the major players in the nation's capital are busy recalibrating their relationships. Well, Rick Horowitz thinks it's pretty clear that when it comes to President Obama, congressional Republicans still just want to sock it to him. Rick.
Hey, boys and girls, it's your Uncle Rick. Welcome back to another episode of Low Production Values Playhouse. And let's meet the star of today's show, okay? Here's our Barack Obama action figure over here. He's the blue one. And over here is our Mitch McConnell no action figure. He's the red one. And today's play is called Dialogue, more like Denialogue. And it goes like this. Mr. Obama talks first. The people want us to work together. You bet. And get things done. You bet. That's why I invited you to dinner at the White House this week. We can't make it this week. I thought you said you could. We can't. How about after Thanksgiving? After Thanksgiving's fine. There'll still be plenty to talk about. For instance? Well, for one thing, we're against it. How can you be against it? We're totally against it. But you haven't heard what it is yet. What is it? It's we're against it. Even though you were for it before? Before is different. We're against it now. Well, I might have to fight you on this one. We've reconsidered. Maybe we can work with you. Excellent, but we don't have much time. We need a month. I can live with that. We need 2 months. I can live with that. We need 6 months. And hearings. We've already had hearings. We need more hearings. We still have questions. You didn't have questions before. We have questions now. And if we answer your questions, we'll have other questions. But don't you want us to work with you? Of course. Don't you want us to be bipartisan? Fine, we'll have more hearings. Perfect. And we'll answer all your questions. Perfect. And then we'll have your support, and we'll consider it. So we'll waste all that time and you'll still oppose it? We didn't say we'll oppose it. We said we'll consider it for 6 months, plus the hearings. But that could really slow things down. We noticed that. That could really slow things down a lot. We noticed that. And in the meantime, I won't be getting anything else done. Nobody said bipartisanship is fast, just to get a few of you to vote with us. Nobody said bipartisanship is easy, just to show we're reaching out. What could be more important? Getting things done? Getting things done is overrated. What matters is trying to win our support. Okay, you've got your hearings. Perfect. And you've got your 6 months. We need a year.
Hey, did you notice Rick's lips were moving?
Thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Stay warm, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and have an absolutely wonderful Thanksgiving.